Okay, another video here. This time it's on the Hubsink. I have really nothing bad to say about the Hubsink. Well, nothing meaningfully bad. Um, I wouldn't say here's my theory on what's going on with the Hubsink, but alright, so this motor's been vented and it's been doing quite well, but eventually the motor does reach a saturation point to where it's just hot and it can't shed the heat. So this year when I kind of redid this build, I decided to use Ferrofluid, and then I obtained two Hubsinks. I looked at one Hubsink and I'm like, this isn't filling up the whole gap between the magnet rings. So when I had my one Hubsink, I realized that I could fit two on this bike. So that's how I ended up with two. Go big or go home. And then also this year, I used Statorade or Ferrofluid to help bridge that air gap between the stator and the magnets. So a lot of the time, I would be riding this bike. This bike is a 5,000 to 6,000 watt build on a Muxus 3000, and so that's a lot of heat to shed. And so pretty much, I'm also using a temp sensor and thermal throttling, and the cycle analyst is doing the thermal throttling. So, whenever I'm doing aggressive street riding or whatever, I'm hitting thermal throttling, really, really early. And then there's been some times where I have to kind of pull off to the side, wait about 5 minutes for the temperatures to drop, just to have them shoot back up like right after like 30 seconds. Like, yeah, I'm really dumping a lot of power and saturating this motor, and it's a 26-inch wheel and it's a 4-turn, so I'm at that edge on what would be efficient for this motor and everything. So I'm already on the edge, and I already knew that. That's why I ended up drilling holes in the side cover to help with venting. As long as I'm cruising at top speed, it doesn't throttle. But when I'm in stop and go, to where I can't get the motor up to speed to where the amps decay, and it's just under a constant heavy load where it's just seeing pretty much max phase amps and everything, it really starts to roast this motor, and I'm hitting thermal throttling a lot. So I put these Hubsinks on, put the Ferrofluid in there, and I'm not going to say it's a night and day difference. But here's the things that I do notice about it. The Ferrofluid, it doesn't cause any noticeable drag or anything that I noticed. I put 10 mils in here. I had 6. I put the recommended 5 or 6 in there, and something weird was going on, so I put in the additional 10. I don't see it leaking out. I don't see it being slung around in the motor case. It seems to just, it seems to be in there doing what it's supposed to do. It's not leaking or getting slung out or whatever. So there's 10 mils of Ferrofluid in there, and I got the Hubsinks. The first thing that I noticed, like ambient temperature of my temp would be like around, like if I just hopped on the bike right now, it's around 24 Celsius. That's the standard ambient cold motor temp. In my neighborhood, there's 3 cul-de-sacs. Each cul-de-sac is at the bottom of a hill, with my street having the steepest hill. I can climb my hill, at 35, 40 miles an hour, dumping 6,000 watts into this motor. So literally in half a mile, just riding up the street around my neighborhood and using regenerative braking back down, I can get this motor up to 100 to 115 C just in that short time. And this is temperature taken in the windings. It's not the stator temperature is not like I have the stator bundled or glued or have a hole in it where I've inserted a temp sensor. The temp sensor is tucked under the windings near the hall sensor, which is a good idea because we really need to focus on keeping the temperature low for those halls. But anyway, so what I noticed is after that ride, I'll, go up the street, round the neighborhood, use regenerative braking back down the hill, and that's dumping. And I was just doing it just to dump a lot of heat into the motor. I'll pull back in my garage. The temperature is at 110 C. In the course of 1 minute, it's dropped from 110 C down to 70 C in 1 minute. And probably within 3 to 5 minutes, it'll drop down even further to about 55, 60 C. And then it's like it's diminishing returns after that point. So in a minute, I can shed that. Like, so if I'm in stop and go traffic, again, like I said, I can ride in Atlanta, I can ride this bike in downtown Atlanta and stay with the flow of traffic. So if I come up to a red light, and most of the time, back in the day when we were hot rodding these motors, we experienced something called heat soak, where the motor would be running at a certain temperature, and as soon as you stop, the temperature will pretty much rise and then fall. So that's pretty much the same thing that this one was doing. It would just sit there, rise, and then slowly fall back down. And that's with the venting. At speed, the venting did work at speed, but when it's sitting still, nothing's really happening. So with the Ferrofluid and the Hubsinks, I'm seeing a huge drop in less than a minute, to where instead of me constantly having the motor hot and more likely in thermal throttling in the stop and go traffic, I can visibly see those temperatures drop, like basically like every second is dropping half a C to a full C, like one degree, like every few seconds is dropping. So, with anything, like whenever you have something extremely hot or extremely cold, and you put something that's opposite, let's say, like, you have, let's say this motor, like before we put the ferrofluid in there, the stator is pretty much its own independent entity. It can't shed the heat because it can't really go anywhere except for and transfer to ambient air. It really couldn't transfer its heat to the motor casing. So the ferrofluid bridged the gap between the stator and the magnet ring, or the magnet ring and the motor flange, or however the outer ring of the motor. That's what the ferrofluid does. It bridges that gap. The Hubsinks also add additional thermal mass to the whole setup, but it's also increased the surface area to where you can create that temperature differential. So when something's very, very hot and is next to something, it automatically wants to transfer its heat to something cooler. And so that magnet ring with the Hubsink on it is definitely a much cooler, it's just cooler. So, the stator wants to transfer its heat over into, another medium or whatever. And so that's what the ferrofluid is creating, that thermal path to shed the heat to the motor casing and to the Hubsinks. Now I can hit this thing for like 5 minutes and come back into the garage and feel the Hubsink, and it's not even hot. But over time, as slowly as this is, basically it's absorbing the heat and then shedding it. But like I said, over time, this does I wouldn't even say it sees a diminishing return, but there's a lag. And I'm only done tests to basically where I ride it hard, stop, and I'm looking at the temperature drop. I haven't really taken this bike back on the road. I just got it back up and going with all the components, but I haven't really taken it back onto the road to see how it deals with sustaining and shedding that heat while in motion. But while it's stationary, is doing its job. Is, I've never seen a motor decrease the temperature by 25, 35 C in a minute. I've never had it with this. I've never had that happen with this motor. So I'm already impressed with that. And I know it's due to the ferrofluid creating that thermal bridge, but the heat sinks, they're light, but they're also adding that extra thermal mass, and it's creating that temperature differential where, again, I can have the windings at 110, 115, 120 C, and these will still be like ambient or ice cold, but there's that temperature gap. Like during the winter time, when I had air cooling during the winter time, just the simple fact that the ambient temperature was 20 to 30 degrees lower than in the summer, I was having immediate motor cooling. So basically the Hubsinks are keeping the motor, the motor casing and everything at such a temperature difference to where is that heat is bleeding away so fast because of the temperature differential. Now, if, like I said, over time, if I'm flogging this thing and eventually get these saturated to the point to where they're matching in temperature, you won't see any temperature difference in between the two, so you won't see any effective cooling. So, like I said, I have to do some more testing to where I'm riding this on the road and dumping the heat in it and still having, the air come across the fins just to see what the temperature difference is, because I'm pretty sure the same effect will happen. It's not actively cooling. I mean, I'm still seeing huge spikes in the motor windings, but the rate at which they drop is a lot better. So it's like when the bike is in motion, it's keeping this cool. So when it actually stops and it has a chance to radiate the heat or transfer the heat to this, that there's such a temperature differential to where it can quickly do that. It's just one of the things, when the bike is in motion, if you have a bike that's set up appropriately, once you get up to top speed, the amp should be tapering down to where it's at a much more manageable level. So instead of me running 6,000 watts into this motor and having 2 to 3,000, I'm going to say at least 2,000 going to heat losses and everything. When you're riding the bike at speed, the bike is pretty much like, this bike does about 2,500 or 3,000 watts at top speed, which falls within the limits of the motor. So with there virtually being, minimal losses, I should be able to sustain 2,000 to 3,000 watts, if not even maybe 1,000 watts more with the extra mass and dissipation of this. I maybe might be able to sustain about 4,000, to 4,500 watts, but I can't sustain those 6,000 watts. This isn't a magical cure-all, but definitely when you pause for the cause after the motor's hot, the temperature drops like a rock, and then it's ready to, once you get it back in motion and it can get rid of this heat and creates that temperature differential again, is ready to rinse and repeat and basically get rid of that heat whenever it needs to. Like I said, amazing. Like I said, I wish I tried to shoot some video of me doing the same thing where basically I had, rode it around the neighborhood, pulled in the garage, and I tried to show it, but like I said, something was a bit off with my camera, to where I recorded the video, but it didn't record like I wanted it. But you just have to take my word for it. There's an immediate drop in the temperature in a reasonable time frame. There isn't like, oh my God, like before I would have to pull over, wait a few minutes until the temperature dropped. No, it's 30 seconds to a minute. It's out of thermal throttling. It's still going to thermal throttle. And like I said, my temp sensor is in my windings, so the windings are seeing the immediate heat. So, but my motor looks brand new. I'm pumping 6,000 watts into it, and not a lick of black is in there as far as the motor windings. So, and I have my thermal throttling set up between 90 C. It starts throttling at 90, and it stops throttling. The top end is at 130, which is right under the temperature of which the Hall sensors get cooked at. But again, like I said, I did the ride the other day, went out, stopped, wait for traffic to clear up, and I just happened to look down. I went from 100, 110 C, and I'm already back down to like 65, 70 C. I mean, that's pretty amazing out of this motor that I've never seen it even do that with the air cooling that I've done. So again, it's like I said, it's not a cure-all. It's not gonna. And like I said, a lot of people like thinking like the temperature is excessive. I don't know where people are putting their temp sensors, but like I said, the temp sensor that came factory with this motor is tucked into the windings by the Hall. It's like wherever the turns are in the stator, the temp sensor is like tucked in, and I think they use like maybe some silicone, like RTV type silicone, to just fasten it in there. So I'm seeing the immediate instant heating of the motor windings. I'm not looking at the stator core temperature, because there's a lag. You can't look at the stator temps, when it comes to this. You have to look at the winding temps, because the windings have insulation ratings, and at a certain temperature they start to break down and get brittle, and the windings are right next to the Halls. So, it'll make more sense to look at your winding temps to stay below the threshold of the Halls. And I think most Hall sensors, they go, I think somewhere around 140 to 150 C, probably closer to 140, because I think the rating is like 250 degrees Fahrenheit, which translates to about 130 C. That's where, any sustained temperatures at that range, you'll start to damage the Halls. And so, but even in my last two motors, I had basically this motor and a Magic Pi, had the temp sensor set up the same exact way, had the thermal throttling set up the same exact way. I have it kick in at 90 C, and it'll throttle all the way down once it gets up to 130 C. But if the cycle analyst is doing its job, it'll never get up to 130 C. I haven't seen 130 C with this. I'm still tuning the controller on this bike. I had to turn the timing event, or the field weakening off. I had to turn that off, because at high speed that was still dumping a lot of, I'm doing 45 miles an hour, which is the top limit for this bike on a normal controller, but it was still dumping 6,000 watts into the motor, and I know the motor can't sustain that, so I turned the field weakening off, and that improved the thermal numbers a lot more, because whenever the bike gets up to top speed, the back EMF is naturally causing everything to throttle back. It's throttle the current back, so the Hubsinks can do a better job. They don't see the huge swings in temperature, because like I said, most of your heat and stuff is coming from acceleration. If your bike is set up right, most of your heat is coming from your acceleration. But once you get up to top speed, the motor is running at a manageable temperature to where, in theory, it should be able to shed the heat that it generates. But since we're all about power, once you go up in voltage, it pushes the motor into a different efficiency range to where we have more losses. And so that's why air cooling comes into play. That's where these Hubsinks come into play. But you're not gonna have a 10,000 watt bike, put these Hubsinks on, and expect it to stay cool. That's not how it works. You still have to plan everything out to where what are you really using this bike for. And again, like for me, this bike with the Hubsink, I ride this in the street. I want to sustain 40 to 45 miles an hour. And I know from experience that this bike can do it, but definitely at some point in time, the heat soak sets in and it just can't get rid of the heat. But like I said, with the implementation of the Ferrofluid and the Hubsinks, I got more thermal mass here. I've bridged that thermal gap between the stator and the motor casing and everything. So, it has a link to that extra mass and that extra heat dissipation from the Hubsinks to really get rid of that heat very, very quickly. And nothing really bad to say about it. It's just all about having realistic expectations. And now I feel that I can ride the bike definitely a lot more harder, and I know all I have to do is just pause. If I'm in a situation where I have a long hill climb or something, I just know all I got to do is just pause for a few minutes and, keep it moving. But it all goes back to, we want all this power and we want it on demand. Yeah, I probably would be better suited with a QS motor that actually has more natural thermal mass than this Mux's 4-turn motor and a 26-inch wheel. I'm not giving this motor any favors. It's in a 26-inch wheel. I'm pushing 85 amps through it, almost 6,000 watts. I got big balloon tires, which probably make this seem like more closer to a 28-inch wheel and everything. So I'm not doing this motor any favors, and I wasn't expecting a miracle, but I do respect what this product has done for the motor, and it falls within my expectations. Is it a cure-all? No. Is it, are there better options? Possibly, but my covers are already drilled, so I really can't do like oil cooling or anything like that. So, I mean, it is what it is. I know this is going on long enough, but that's my current experience with this. It's like when I ride it hard and I stop, it gets rid of the heat. Now, I'll probably do an update to this video to let you know how it actually works. How it works when you're actually at speed. When you're actually just riding it like a normal bike, and what temperature. I mean, the thing is, even when I'm riding it like a normal bike on our multi-use path, this bike doesn't have an issue with heat. It's whenever I'm asking it to do 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, and it's pushing 6,000 watts through those windings, which it wasn't intended. It wasn't made for that. So, again, it's like all about your expectations. Are your expectations of this realistic? Mine was, I think the Ferrofluid helped out a lot. I think the extra mass on this helped out a lot. I didn't think it would. I mean, I knew for a fact that, my neighborhood is the proving ground for all of my bikes. If I were to walk out and show you the hills in my neighborhood, you would say, like, there's no way that even on a regular bike, you would push your bike. Even in granny gear, you'll push your bike up the hill versus climbing these hills. So, and that's the same thing that goes in my entire neighborhood. If my bikes can't ride around in my neighborhood, in the adjacent neighborhoods, without, basically, like, if I ride over there, I've been caught in the other neighborhoods having to stop to let my motor cool down. And I went around the block the other day, and it performed flawlessly. And, even on some of the areas where I knew for a fact that this is going to thermal throttle, I'm going to be stuck over here for a minute or two letting this thing cool down. But no, I made it through the entire neighborhood fine. I looked at my temperatures and I'm like, oh shit, I need to stop. But at the same time, I was looking at traffic to find a clearing, but in the time that it took for me to wait for the traffic to clear up, I had already gotten out of I was in thermal throttling, but I already got out of thermal throttling within those 30 seconds to a minute. I already got out of thermal throttling, and full powers was restored back to the bike to where it could take another hit. Again, acceleration is where most of the stuff, acceleration and high lows is where the heat is coming from. You're pushing that motor out of its efficiency range. It's more efficient when it's up at top speed. So I don't think there's any problem with this at top speed. It's just whenever you have stop and go or a lot of hills or something, you want to be able to have the bike to recover quickly, and this allows it. So, and that is if your bike is set up correctly. If you have like a fast winding, I don't care what speed you're at, that motor's never going to get to top speed and is sitting there doing nothing but gobbling up amps. If you didn't take the time to do the research to get the motor winding to where you need it to allow that natural back EMF amp decay of the phase current to happen to give the motor a time to breathe and recover. I mean, don't give me this bullshit and don't shit on this product, because it's not going to help you. And when your bike is set up correctly, this will help you. So, nothing but praises for the product. I know this is a little bit winded, but this is it. Thanks for watching.